It is 7 o'clock, Wednesday, January 27th, 2016. This is the Evanston Plan Commission. I am Jim Ford. We have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. You have the agenda for this evening. Are there changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will stand. You have the minutes of January 13th, 2016. Are there corrections or additions to the minutes? The staff did pick up a couple of omissions that had been in the January draft, so this one is updated and as far as I could see is complete. Hearing no comments on the agendas, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Goddard, second.
Second.
Lewis, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Yes? No, no one opposed is what I meant. The minutes are approved. We have two pieces of new business tonight. And I have too much paperwork. The first, case number 15, PLND 0002, zoning ordinance text amendment to City Code Title VI to make artist studios a permitted use on the ground floor in the D2, D3, and D4 downtown districts to match current regulations in the D1 downtown district. This is a public hearing. We have no public present. This came to us as an aldermanic reference, so the staff are the petitioners, and I will ask Mr. Latinovich, I will welcome Mr. Latinovich back to the dais and ask him to present the case.
Thank you, Chairman Ford. So this one is a relatively simple text amendment. Currently, the regulations for artist studios is, as it's indicated on the slide, they're allowed on any floor within a building that's in the D1, downtown fringe district. And then in the other downtown districts, D2, D3, and D4, their artist studios are only allowed on the floors above the ground floor. So the proposal is to eliminate that provision that restricts artist studios only on the upper floors. So that would allow the artist studios on all floor levels, including the ground floor. That way we would match the regulations in the D2, D3, and D4 districts to the existing regulations in the D1. And this slide indicates really the extent of the proposed text amendment. So the way it's listed in the D2, D3, and D4, in the permitted uses, artist studios, and then in parentheses, when located above the ground floor. So we would just strike that portion of the use title. The idea here is really that we're looking to make consistent regulations across the downtown for all downtown districts. We believe that this was intentional. It was placed in the ordinance for the purpose of maintaining the ground floor for retail uses and restaurants and other types of sales tax generating uses. But what, in essence, I think what we've seen is that some of these uses that are not necessarily retail focused, they also generate a lot of traffic and bring in families to the downtown, and are also, the boundaries between the districts are not so clear. So, potential uses are looking to locate downtown, and they find a property that they think is in D1 or something. They don't necessarily realize it's in the other district. So that complicates the regulations, and so we think that this is a good text amendment to simplify the regulations and bring in the diversity of uses to the downtown that will hopefully increase the vitality and livability of the downtown overall. So we believe that the standards have been satisfied, and I'd leave it at that. If I'd be open to any questions.
Questions? Commissioner Goddard.
Why is this different from the beauty studios that we decided not to allow on the first floor in those districts?
So when we considered, if I remember correctly, we titled them personal service establishments. And the concern with those, the proposal was to create a buffer between them. The proposal was presented to the Plan Commission. Ultimately, the Plan Commission recommended approval, if I believe, but then at the City Council, it was not approved. The idea was, because we're seeing too many of those uses concentrate in certain commercial districts, the idea was to maybe create a buffer for their own sake so that they're not competing too much, and then they sort of allow for the diversity of different uses within their immediate area so that, customers can visit, a beauty salon and maybe others, et cetera. I mean, what's going on in this one is, we have really only a handful of these that have come. I can think of only one downtown. So the frequency of these in the downtown area, anywhere else in the city, is much more rare. We don't see a lot of artist studios. So if we had too many of them, then it may be appropriate to consider restrictions on the ground floor so that they're adequately dispersed. But right now, there's just not enough of them at all. So this proposal would invite this type of use that's more for sort of to invite families. There's something to do for families.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yeah, I guess I have the same kind of curiosity I'll premise this with, we had limited real estate firms and things that, bring in some foot traffic, but didn't do enough. And frankly, I don't know of too many of these artist studios, but I don't understand what kind of foot traffic you can actually say that they, the kind of vitality that they bring for, a limited amount of classes, I guess is the thing. And we're not talking about galleries, we're talking about studios. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
So
what we've heard is, this is a general initiative that the city has had, and the Downtown Management Association is the idea to bring in a diversity of uses to specifically downtown. This is the downtown we're talking about. So they've identified the need for uses that may bring in families, children to the downtown rather than adults that are either, coming for work or they're, frequenting restaurants or whatnot. So this was seen as one of those potential uses that could bring in families. And so an artist studio is, something that has evolved over time where an artist could create classes and bring in, children or something like that. You're exactly right, Commissioner Lewis. It's not a gallery. It is a sort of a use that's evolved over time that can, offer classes, provide, sell some things if it has some retail component of that. And so the idea was just to diversify the uses downtown and try to bring in some families with these things.
Is it also seen that this would bring in traffic, weekend traffic?
I think your mic's not on, Colby.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it also thought that this would bring in weekend traffic or extend the
after hours and
yeah,
weekend,
yeah.
Yep.
Commissioner Isaac, or Belial? Somebody.
I'll take it. My question is, as we've been discussing the artist studio being kind of a flexible definition, is there any way that somebody could use that designation to circumvent any other commercial use regulation or something like that?
We don't think so. We have a definition for a cultural institution that specifically includes galleries. So if a use was going to be specifically a gallery, that's where it would fall under cultural institution. These are very unique uses that there's even, I wouldn't even say that there's a specific definition of an artist studio, because one artist studio could include an actual dwelling unit that's sort of in the back for the artist. It could include, a space where they would be offering classes in the front, but then they're doing their art in the back. It might include a gallery. They're really, I would say they differ based on the type of art they're providing. And they're kind of unique to themselves. So I couldn't think of a sort of a different type of use that we can kind of classify these depending on what they're proposing.
I think to some extent the market forces of downtown are going to keep out artists who are just looking to create their own art, just based on the current status of how much rent is charged for downtown retail. That's as of today. Obviously, in the future, that could change. But if what we're looking at, what we're looking at allowing is an art studio that is primarily open to the public for classes, wouldn't it make sense to include that in the definition? So to allow artistic studios above the second floor, and then say that they can be allowed on the first floor if they're open to the public or primarily used for classes that are open to the public, to sort of really specify the type of use we're looking for in the downtown area.
I think it's a very valid point. I think yes, it would be certainly helpful to be more specific and then allow only those types of artist studios that are open to general public in some format. And I'm not sure how we would define that, but yeah. I think what we didn't want to do, we didn't want to complicate the matter more than it's necessary. Currently, they're just listed as artist studios, and we didn't want to add additional classification that would make it different from the artist studio in D1 and then from the artist studios in the other districts where it's allowed, where it's only listed as artist studio. So that was the idea of keeping it simple. And then at the same time, because they're so unique where we don't really, there isn't a proposal right now. Like, we don't know what type of artist studios we're going to be encountering. So that was the thought process in terms of adding any other restrictions on it. So,
Commissioner Dubin, you
Is there going to be an issue with the looks of, say, a ceramics classroom set up with clay and everything, potter's wheels spattered with clay that you'll see through the storefront? Is that going to be bothersome to anybody, or?
It could create a problem if it's on the exterior. I think if it's on the interior, you're correct. You know, with the storefront type of buildings downtown, you would be able to see inside. Yeah, that's a valid point. I think we generally don't go so far into regulating how businesses on the inside kind of keep their places tidy and whatnot. But in terms of the visibility from and there's a Downtown Management Association that's pretty active, that, you know, if there is a use that it just doesn't fit in, I mean, I think there's other ways to kind of regulate that type of nuisance if there is one.
Commissioner Lewis, you had another question?
How is this different from, say, dance studios, and how are dance studios categorized now? I believe there were a few in some downtown districts. I know along Davis there was one for a while, and
Well, it would depend what the dance studio looks like. I'd have to look into the code. We also have a performing, I want to say it's called Performing Arts Center of some sort that includes, performing arts type of uses. So I'm trying to think if it would qualify under that. I mean, if you give me a few minutes, maybe I can scroll down through the list of uses that we allow, and then I can see if there's a particular use that is that catches that.
well, okay, so are dance studios currently allowed in the D2, D3, et cetera? I guess is the.
That dance studio you're talking about was on the second floor.
Aren't dance studios always on the second floor?
There's one in Central Street that's on the first floor. Exactly.
We're on Central Street.
Right at the end
Across the bank.
Again, I think market forces will probably keep a good number of those type of uses away from the downtown, unless you're talking about a dance studio that has classes for very young children who are not in school and able to have classes during the day and then after school. There's only going to be so many of them in one given area.
So what you're suggesting is that in the nature of the market, these uses that can afford to be on the first floor in the downtown are going to be ones that are going to attract traffic, revenue, retail sales, something.
Unless someone is willing to lose money at the proposition,
Yeah.
I think they have to be generating sales.
Right.
So it's either going to be a very successful artist who is willing to pay for that
Well-
location and that space, or it's going to be someone who's able to fill classes and
So-
get people to pay enough money to justify the rent they'll be paying.
Selling art or education or entertainment.
Correct.
Yeah. I still have a light on.
Yeah, this the whole market forces thing is always a little double-edged to me because nail studios obviously were very successful at venturing into those areas, and is there ever going to be a point where I mean then you have to control them? I mean we're not just letting things go with market forces. So
I absolutely agree, which is why I suggested that maybe focus the allowable use in order to be clear what exactly we're looking to allow and not have any unintended consequences.
Can you put words around that idea?
Let's see.
Or can staff put words around that idea?
Adding additional text to the use title?
To clarify that what we are talking about here is sales or entertainment oriented or education.
Well, the sale of art would be covered under the galleries.
Under gallery. Okay, yeah, so education or, where the primary purpose is education or entertainment?
I think you want to mention that they're open to the public. Because you could still have a private art studio where a person says that they have one student and they're educating them.
Where the primary purpose is education and or entertainment open to the public.
Yeah, that's good.
Does that work?
I think so.
You want to comment on that?
No, I mean, if the commission feels that it's needed to add additional provision to the definition of the artist studio, I mean, certainly we can process that. I would then suggest maybe adding that same verbiage to the one type of artist studios allowed in the D1, so that we have the same type of artist studios allowed across the board. We didn't feel that it was necessary. I think we kind of tend to lean on that idea that an artist that's willing to open up his own studio downtown, he's doing it for the sake of exposure to the customers and the downtown. So that's the reason why we didn't include any other things. But if the commission feels that it's needed to exclude some of those, artist studios that may not want to entertain public on the inside. I don't know, you know.
Whose light is that? Simon? Yeah.
From a regulation and enforcement standpoint, does that make it more complicated for something that's not enormous, though?
Yes. And then for this particular use, it certainly is a little bit more difficult because the nature of an artist is one that kind of evolves over time. And if we had to pin them down to specify, the percentage of their business revenue, how much of that is coming from teaching of classes and how much from your sale of art and that kind of stuff, it would be difficult to come to a number where we can say, well, now we can say that that's a primary source of income and not. And it could vary month to month, year to year. So yes, it makes it a little bit more complicated.
That would, however, put the city in the driver's seat as far as what it would otherwise deem allowable, and allow the city to set its own precedent as time passes on and downtown changes, perceptions change.
You're not going to license here, so this is essentially complaint-based enforcement, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Terry, you're looking dubious.
Yeah, there's got to be a way to not be so restrictive, not require so much oversight, but get across. I don't care if they make money or not, if it's open to the public. Could be a guy working away in the back, but he's got a display in the front, and or a woman, and is happy to see people come through. But you couldn't use his revenue as a basis for okaying that he's complying with the code. So
I don't think we're talking about we're not talking about putting any language like that as far as defining open to the public as, making 51% of your revenue from.
No, but I feel like you're getting a little toward that by even specifying for entertainment or education. That bothers me. There's got to be a way to.
Well, then why do they have to be in the downtown district? I mean, if they're not.
Well, I think what you want is for them to be an establishment that doesn't lock its doors, basically. It's,
Well,
I mean, do
think
you have to specify that for other businesses downtown?
Well, I think you want more than that. I mean, if our purpose, if one of our big purposes is to put uses on first floors which are traffic attractors, then I got into the middle of that thought and don't know how to get out of it. We certainly want more than an artist who is simply setting up on the first floor and his doors are open, and if you'd like to come in and watch, that would be fine. But the place that sticks in my mind, that comes to mind, is do you know the Violin Place near Village Hall in Wilmette?
Yes.
Doing sales and rental, and doing instrument repair in the back. So they are both a sales place and a studio. And I don't know how much foot traffic they attract, but it is an attractive enough use that just having that on the first floor adds something to downtown Wilmette that you don't ordinarily see. But maybe I'm just in love with stringed instruments.
I mean, leaving it more open and just saying art studios definitely allows for more freedom, and says, that's us saying that we're going to let, at least for now, market forces rule and see where it leads us. It's another way to go. It just depends on what we as a group think.
Here again, assuming that market forces are going to lead to open to the public, essentially.
Now, just to clarify, we do allow a use that's called cultural facility, which is in essence can be a gallery that's open to public only a couple hours a day. There's no requirement on the hours of, that they're open to public. So there are other uses with that, they don't necessarily have to be open to public. They're on the ground floor.
I have to imagine there's very little risk in the downtown becoming overwhelmed with artist galleries, that we're not really risking all that much by just leaving it open-ended as staff recommends. But I think there's philosophically we're, going off on, the intent, right? So I guess I'm tending to lean toward just going with what they say, and as you say, we can always later, if it becomes a big issue, recommend that the redefinition, right? I don't think there's.
Yeah, we can certainly revisit.
Yeah.
I think the language that you've recommended is what brought us Ayla's Originals on Sherman, which is a bead store, beads, jewelry, and gifts classes, and that is the kind of thing we're aiming for. And there was no more specificity to the language in the zoning that got us that. So I think I would agree with Colby that we'd be okay with this language.
Well, that was easy. Then are we ready for a motion to recommend to council that the staff recommendation be adopted? Belisle, Lewis. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Thank you. I must say, I think that was useful, despite the fact that we ended up back where we started. Sometimes going around and looking at the other side of the tree is helpful. Okay. Case number 16, PLND 0003, a zoning ordinance text amendment to establish dog daycare businesses and dog sitting as permitted home occupations. Mr. Latinovich.
Thank you. So the second text amendment tonight is in regards to adding 2 additional uses to the list of permitted home occupation uses. So what is a home occupation? There's a definition in the zoning ordinance. It's an accessory use of a dwelling unit that is used for gainful activity involving the provision, assembly, processing, or sale of goods and/or services that is incidental and secondary to the use of a dwelling unit, but excluding the provision of shelter and lodging. And then also that accessory use of a dwelling has to be used for gainful employment that involves the provision, assembly, processing, or sale of goods and/or services, and it's incidental and secondary to the residential use of the structure and does not change the essential residential character of the dwelling unit. And again, also it excludes the uses that provide shelter or lodging to persons who are not members of the family. So that's what we're dealing with. This is basically home occupations are there to allow homeowners to run businesses from their homes. And in the simplest fashion, this is how the whole thing started, is if an attorney or an architect or social services counselor or somebody wants to accept some clients at home and do some work from home, they have a home office or something like that, this provision allows something like that to take place. So the zoning ordinance clarifies a number of restrictions in terms of the requirements that home occupation has to comply with, how much of a home has, the maximum area of a home that can be used towards a home occupation, how many clients can come in and utilize and visit the facility, if any other members outside of the members of the family can actually be employed there as part of that home occupation. and then further classifies them into minor and major based on sort of the impact that they can create. And it's really based on then, minor home occupations. You can only have 6 clients during the day. I think it's 400 square feet maximum of a home that can be used for home occupation. When it comes to a major home occupation, it allows a quarter of the home to be used, and you can have 12 clients visit. So on the slide here, we have the existing minor home occupations that are currently allowed. That includes attorneys, CPAs, architects, as I mentioned. Artist studios are one of those that can be allowed as home occupations, provided that no retail business is conducted on the premise.
Go downtown.
That's right. Word processing and people that provide typing services up from home, therapists, social workers, et cetera. So what we are proposing to do, and again, this is an aldermanic reference, would to allow 2 other types of home occupations. The first one would be the domestic animal daycare service, but not to exceed a total of 3 animals over the age of 4 months, including property owners' pets. And similarly, the second one would be to allow dog sitting services, not to exceed the 3 animals. So the restriction on the 3 animals comes in from a public safety code section of the city code that essentially says that nobody can have more than 3 adult pets at home. So this would really limit people that may have 1 pet of their own or no pets of their own to accept up to 3 other animals and sort of take care of them at their own home. And so we felt that restriction it makes sense because anybody can have 3 animals. So if they are owned by the property owner or if they're dropped off occasionally by somebody else, but you're still within that limit of 3, it seems like it's in the spirit of the home occupation, and it should not be a nuisance. And then we have the dog sitting services. So in essence, the dog sitting is where, in essence, a person who's running that operation goes to somebody else's house while they're away and takes care of their animals. So that's called, like, instead of house sitting, you're sitting their dogs, you're dog sitting. But by listing it in the home occupation, we allow them to actually bring them to their own home so that, that you're not tied to being over there at the actual pet's owner's home, so you can actually bring them to your own house if you need to. So that's the kind of the difference between the 2 uses. And it also, the second provision allows people that really have dog sitting services and they want to have an office inside their home to kind of run that, or whatever the involvement involves. It would allow for both of those uses as home occupations. So I can sense that there's going to be some questions on that, and I'd be happy to answer. I was trying to read up and learn on the other sections of the public safety code that deals with pets, dogs and cats and whatnot. So hopefully I can answer all the questions that you have. But we think that this type of use that was brought up to us as sort of a complaint. That, hey, somebody is taking on a couple of dogs from their neighbor or somebody else, and that's not listed as a home occupation. We realized, okay, these things are happening out there in the community, and there's a need for that. And we feel that this home occupation is by no means any more. It shouldn't be any more nuisance than the other ones that are listed on there. So we do believe that it's compatible with the overall character of the residential areas where home occupations do take place. So in essence, we feel that the standards have been met, and with that, I'd open to any questions.
Commissioner Lewis.
I understand it in like R1, R2, R3 kinds of districts, but downtown where there's multifamily and high density, and these dogs could become nuisances going through lobbies and things like that. How is that addressed, or how do you foresee that being,
Well,
Does the 3 animal limit apply in those zones?
Yeah, it applies to any home. You still cannot have any more than 3 animals. So.
Okay, well, I was going to answer my own question by saying that probably in a multi-family building that there would be their own regulations for the condominium or something that would regulate that. But I just was, wondering if it was still the purview of this to, to have some sort of limitation in D1 or any kind of high-density area or something. I don't know what the thoughts are.
Again, we decided by limiting to 3 animals, anybody living in a condo or a single-family home, they're still allowed to have 3 animals. Now, they have to, if there are condo association rules, they have to comply with those. So if they're allowed to have 3 medium-sized dogs, if they own them or if their relative owns them and they're taking care of them, we felt that kind of addresses that, so.
I'm sorry, I've got this image of every resident of 831 Emerson having 3 dogs.
Yeah, and Great Danes also.
Big-
you know?
yeah, big dogs.
Big Great Danes, you know, kind of loafing through there. Every single kid is working their way through college by being
Pet
dog
sitting.
sitters, you know, so.
Commissioner Belisle, save us.
Well, I'm taking a slightly different direction. So by talking about, at the first, so we were supposed to take this into the meeting. It was scheduled for January 27th. We didn't have quorum. We're here now. One of the changes that has appeared since then is we've kind of seem to be floating between dogs and domestic animals. And I would like some clarification on what are we talking about, and is there are there regulations on what kind of domestic animals they can be, because that can be, and I don't know the public safety code off the top of my head.
So the idea between titling it as domestic animal versus a dog daycare service, it was simply for consistency, because commercial uses are classified as domestic animal daycare center, if it's a commercial activity, and also to allow other people those that necessarily don't want to daycare dogs, but they want to maybe take care of cats or other type of pets, that would in essence enable those two. So that was the reason why we retitled that.
And that's appreciated, and I guess it probably wouldn't be much of a nuisance, but could somebody have 3 hamsters?
Yes.
Yes.
And
But not more than 3.
okay. And maybe maybe in a more serious matter, the 3-animal rule. What I do like with the age restriction on, mostly for dogs, because I think dogs tend to be a little noisier than cats, is that if your own dog were to have a litter of puppies, then it doesn't close down your business. So that's one thing to know.
Yeah.
We probably would have to have 2 dogs for that, but that's another question. Totally different direction, and later in the packet, it was made clear that at the number 8, which are other potential minor home occupations, one of the things that's taken into account to make it a minor home occupation is noise. And I don't really see how any kind of having even 3 dogs compares to a CPA or an architect or other minor home occupations. And I wonder how that was taken into account.
So nuisance from, I'm going to say barking dogs or anything like that, is handled by the public safety code. And there's a whole section that, based on a complaint, the police is sent out to evaluate if a certain animal can be classified as a nuisance. And then there's restrictions on what happens to that, how it has to be confined within a house and registered, et cetera. So there are clear definitions on how an animal can be classified as a nuisance. So if somebody does complain about excessive barking or something like that, we would follow up. Police would be sent out, and there are specifications on what they have to investigate. And then if it is classified, then we would it would have to be confined within a house or other things.
And the way the public safety code is written, this would not create an exception to it? This would not step outside the public safety code?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Isaac.
So I noticed that you, in the packet, included the definition of kennel, but the language being used for the proposed home occupation is dog sitting. Why are we moving away from the language that's already in the ordinance?
There is a section of the code under home occupations that specifically does not allow kennels. It was part of the packet, part of the items that were attached in the back. We could,
Are we going to say domestic animal sitting? Are we going to be as allowable for other animals other than dogs for sitting?
that's the intent, and we can certainly change that. I think that's a very good point, that maybe we say, because then if somebody wants to sit somebody's cats, they can bring them over and take care of them. That's a very valid point. We can do that.
Does it also make sense to include at least portions of the definition of kennel in a definition for sitting, for domestic animal sitting, where in the definition for kennel it discusses housing of domestic animals, including overnight stays.
We could just add, instead of, we can just say including overnight stays or something.
Okay. I mean, it goes on to talk about animals permitted outside only with staff. I mean, what's staff's position about including those prohibitions?
We decided not to do that. We looked at that, where somebody has to be out there, and these animals are allowed to be, say, in the backyard, only if a person who's taking care of them is present outside. And because we're limiting this to only 3 animals, including homeowners' pets, we felt that, again, it's no different than a homeowner owning 3 pets and then letting them go outside without accompanying those pets in the backyard or whatever. So that was the reason why we didn't include that particular provision that talks about hours of letting them outside or whatnot.
The only potential difference I see is that animals that don't live with each other, let's just call them dogs. Dogs that don't live with each other aren't necessarily going to get along the same way as dogs that are just kind of thrown in together because they're being, quote unquote, dog sat together. Now that is potentially a, issue for the home occupation operator to take up and decide whether they want to, how they want to run their business. But just from a, potential noise standpoint, neighbors may appreciate knowing that if someone's going to be using their home for a dog sitting business, that when the dogs are outside, they're out there and being attentive to the dogs they're sitting.
These types of home occupations would be required to be licensed because, in essence, you're taking care of dogs that are not your own. So only a homeowner with their own pets, you don't have to register your own pets. But if you're running this type of home occupation, you'll have to get a license, animal license. So then if somebody files a complaint about, excessive, I'm going to say barking or any kind of noise, then yes, that license can be revoked and they can lose
So
that.
not a home occupation license,
Correct, and an animal license.
but an animal license.
An animal license.
Correct.
Under the Public Safety Code? Not
Yes.
under this code?
Right. Mhm.
Should we be specifying in here that, making some cross-reference so that it's clear here that the Public Safety Code does apply?
And would that apply to both daycare and sitting, the animal license?
Can you repeat that question? If they're per public safety code, and I can find the section, any facility that's taking care of animals needs to have an animal license.
So we can allow it under the zoning code saying if you have less than 3 and you can have it, but if to run your business, you also need the animal license, and if you make too much noise, it's that one you're going to lose. It has nothing to do with the zoning.
Correct, and that, yes.
I definitely think it makes sense to include a reference to the safety code.
It's
To the-
title, I'll just specify it's Title 9, Chapter 4. It's pretty extensive, but we can reference that.
Yeah, just reference that a individual who is licensed under that section of the code.
But we don't do that for anything else. I mean, I think we're getting a little redundant here.
But we're talking about a home occupation,
Yeah.
right? So
Right, exactly. We don't say that about attorneys or social workers or other people who are licensed.
I think for the most part, your neighbors or the operator itself would take care of the problem if the neighbors start barking about the noise. And very often, these dog sitting services or daycares, they don't want dogs that don't get along, and they'll ask a dog to leave. So I think this is a problem that'll work itself out without the city having to specify it.
Yes, I agree.
but
It's
is
only
it-
3 dogs.
Yeah, but is it clear that if we were to allow this under the zoning ordinance, the public safety requirement of licensing a place that keeps animals, that deals with animals, would kick in automatically whether we said it or not? Yes? Oh, okay.
That's not clear
If
to me.
it'll kick in automatically,
let
then...
me read
but it-
the
but it-
let me read the section of the license requirement. And I think a reference is probably not required. So it says section 9-4-3-1. No person shall, without first obtaining a license, therefore, in writing from the city manager or his or her designee, own, keep, harbor, or have custody of any animal over 4 months of age. And then excludes birds, amphibians, rodents, non-poisonous snakes. So,
Kept solely as pets.
Okay.
yeah.
And the language is clear that would apply
So
to
that-
temporary as well as permanent ownership, management, whatever.
It says any animal. However, you go into section 9-4-3-2, the occupancy of any premises by more than 3, this is where it talks about more than 3 dogs shall be prohibited. So yeah, I don't think we need to reference it in the zoning because it's fairly clear that just by even having a dog walking service, I would say you'd need to have this license by the city.
And there is a reference to Title 9, Chapter 4 in the proposal, which
Okay. Somebody's light is still on down here.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yep, it's okay. Commissioner Lewis.
So I just wanted to make one counter argument for the references. Doesn't it empower people who are, feeling distressed at the neighbors yapping and not getting any kind of cooperation to be able to go a little further than they know the zoning ordinance, they go to it, they know that they can't do that. Doesn't it give them a little power to kind of go a little deeper and help enforce it with, they could go to the police, but
Realistically, if I'm bothered by my next-door neighbor's dog, which isn't very often, I'm going to call the general city helpline and let them figure out who the enforcer is.
I had a neighbor that I was always, they were totally useless to go to the.
Yeah. The last person I would call, I wouldn't think to call the zoning people first.
Yeah, right.
No, but people do look at the zoning ordinance too, when they're in reference to property use and things. Anyway, they have on me.
Have actually looked at the zoning ordinance and called you on it?
Yeah. Strange. We had some dispute
All right, where are we? I have a sense maybe we've come back around again to the front end of this project. Okay, do we have then a motion to recommend to City Council that staff's recommendation on 16 PLND 0003 be approved?
Second?
Dubin, Goddard, any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Thank you. The next order of business, finally, we get to appointment of liaisons and zoning committee members. Actually, we've got 3 committees to which we need to make appointments, given the requirement in the rules that everyone be on a committee. I believe now the membership of the zoning committee comprises Commissioner Lewis as chair, Commissioners Dubin, Goddard, myself, and Belisle. I am going to withdraw myself. I would like to add Commissioner Isaac if he's willing to be added.
I have no objection.
Zoning committee, good. The Rules Committee, myself and Commissioner Lewis, and we will add members if we reach the point where we need the Rules Committee to meet. Comp Plan Committee, myself, Commissioners Pagozzi, Steele, and Dubin, and unless he wants to object to it, I would add Commissioner Brown. Do I hear any problems with any of that? And then can we have a motion to appoint those committees? Lewis, second. Second. Goddard, all in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you. Liaisons, as of now, the liaisons are Commissioner Dubin to Economic Development, Commissioner Goddard to Housing and Community Development, Commissioner Lewis to Planning and Development, myself to Parking and Transportation. Commissioner Goddard is also our representative on the ADA Advisory Committee. We need to appoint someone to be our liaison to the Place Names Committee. If I don't hear a volunteer in about 3 seconds, I'll take it.
How often do they meet?
Rarely.
Yeah, rarely.
Rarely.
What is the place names?
Like a riot, you know, you could like name it
Colby Lewis.
whatever, you know.
Yeah, when they get around, after I leave the chair and they get around to naming some minor street, you know, the Browns,
Valley.
it's the committee that does the Brown Street signs.
Yeah, okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Hearing no objection, we'll just leave those appointments in place. Associate members currently comprise Seth Freeman, Lenny Asaro, Dave Galloway, and Scott Peters. Scott, I know, would like to continue to serve. You know, he's had enough on his plate the last year that he hasn't been able to be with us, but I know he's still interested. We have no evidence that the other 3 continue to be interested. I would recommend that we let those appointments lapse, with the exception of Scott Peters, and that we elect him an associate for 2016. Any concerns? That is an election, so it requires a motion. Someone want to move? Lewis, second. Goddard. All in favor? Opposed? None. Appointments are made. You have in your packet the 2015 report of the Plan Commission, which we are required to prepare and submit to City Council. Thanks to staff for helping to put that together. We don't need to take any action on it. It's there for information. Has that, do you know, already been submitted to the clerk? Does the council have it? Okay, so it's a
Well, I'm
done,
not sure if the council has it, but it was
but the
submitted.
clerk
to-
has it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a done deal. Jessica not being here, there is no public comment. Demir, anything else we need to know?
Not at this moment, no.
Can we assume that we're going to have a project for the March meeting?
Yes, we do anticipate the meeting will take place. I believe it's March 9th. It should be another plan development.
Are we anticipating a large public turnout for this March meeting?
There is a neighborhood meeting going on right now, so we'll know more tomorrow if there's
As
a
we
large.
speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have said that the reason Demir is up here is because Megan is at the neighborhood meeting over there. Okay, if there's no other business come before us, may we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Goddard, second. Belisle. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? None. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.